Hey, we're back for the next chapter of the cognitive behavioural theory. Today we're looking at chapter 5, how parenting styles impact negative behavioural patterns. Cognitive behavioural therapy is founded on the theory that the thoughts and emotions influence behaviour. Therefore, it would be incomplete to talk about the whole cognitive behavioural process without discussing behaviour. After all, negative thoughts usually result in negative behaviors. Over the years, behavioral psychologists have tried to understand how the mind and behavior are connected. What makes up your mind is your cognitive processes, that is, your thoughts, beliefs, and values. When negative thoughts overtake the mind, they result in negative feelings and behaviors in an individual. These negative behaviors become a recurring pattern, and soon you have a behavioral problem to deal with. Childhood and upbringing are the major contributors to recurring negative patterns. Some biological, environmental, and emotional factors affect your childhood and upbringing, thereby contributing to the development of negative behaviors in a child. Some people learn to let go of these negative behaviors as they grow into adults. However, for other people, it becomes a pattern that they are unable to stop. As an adult, whatever bad habit you have can be easily traced back to events that occurred when you were a child. Parents and caregivers are the primary role models every child has in life. However, not all parents turn out to be good models for their kids. Negative parenting is a major cause of negative behaviors in children. When negative behaviors are not managed from childhood, they blossom into adulthood, with the individual thriving in negativity. Research has shown that people who exhibit aggressive behaviors or have aggressive tendencies often had a poor relationship with their parents as a child. Negative parenting involves being raised by parents who only exhibit negative emotions, like anger themselves. It also has to do with being verbally, emotionally, or physically abused by your parents in childhood. This usually becomes a pattern. When the parents predominantly express negative emotions towards a child, it paves the way for hostile behavior by the child. Now, when a child starts exhibiting traits of hostility or aggression, the parent becomes even more abusive and hostile in a bid to change the child's behavior. Thus, both the child and the parent start to bring out the worst in each other. It becomes a cycle. Children who are raised in a negative parenting style usually grow up to become angry, explosive, and even abusive. In some cases, the child may grow up with broken self-esteem, which causes him to be extremely timid, afraid, and anxious, while also resulting in certain sets of negative behaviors. The end result of negative parenting is usually negative behavior, but it can take different directions. As a child, if you are brought up in a toxic family or environment, one of two things will happen. First, you either learn these toxic behaviors and start exhibiting them too. If not, you learn to accept toxic feelings and behaviors as acceptable since you have watched it your whole life. A child that is raised in a negative and hostile environment will most likely have a perspective of the world as a negative space. Such a child ends up with a mindset that the world is never kind and no good can come out of such a hostile place. Show kindness to a person that is raised with a negative mindset like this, and you will see them marvel. This kind of mindset is destructive, to say the least. Someone with a mindset like this will never see the positive angle to anything, just the negative. Research has shown that parenting styles and behavioral development and adjustments are connected. Parenting behaviors is what determines how a child learns to internalize or externalize feelings and emotions. Internalized feelings and behaviors refer to emotion-centric problems, such as anger, anxiety, and depression. Externalized behaviors refer to conduct-based problems. For example, problems like anxiety and depression are influenced by the parenting style used to raise you, and they usually continue into adulthood as behavioral disorders unless immediately dealt with. I must say that there is no single right way to parent a child. Different styles work for different children. but the best parents always apply a variety of parenting styles to adapt to specific scenarios. The parenting styles you are raised with determine how your cognitive process, that is, how you feel about yourself and your perception of the world, is shaped. Psychologist Diana Baumrind is the pioneer of studies on parenting styles. In the early 1960s, Baumrind conducted research on children of preschool age using a combination of parental interviews, naturalistic observation, and other methods in order to understand the different dimensions of parenting. Based on the results of her study, Baumrind was able to identify 3 dominant parenting styles. However, further studies by Maccabee and Martin brought the parenting styles up to 4. So let's talk about the 4 parenting styles and how they shape cognition and behavior. Authoritarian parenting style, permissive parenting style, authoritative parenting style, and uninvolved parenting style. Authoritarian parenting style is regarded by behavioural experts as the second worst type of parenting. Authoritarian parents treat children in an insensitive way, without taking the children's feelings into consideration. This style of parenting is a dictatorship parenting style. A child is expected to follow certain rules of the parents without question. The child is treated like someone that should never be heard and is always their parents' rules or nothing else. If a child fails to comply with their parents' rules, it results in corporal punishment. A typical authoritarian parent will say, "You must do this because I said so." When a child tries to question their action or a particular rule, that was the end of that sentence. The authoritarian parenting style may seem like a disciplinary style meant to shape children up obediently, but it is unresponsive. Parents usually don't pay attention to the thoughts, feelings, and needs of the child. Children are expected to behave in certain ways without making errors, but the parents provide no guidance or direction to help the children. If you were raised in an authoritarian parenting style, you must have grown up wondering if you would ever be able to please your parents. You were probably punished harshly whenever you made a mistake. Rather than learning how to make better choices in life, you grew up feeling extremely bad about yourself. This can severely damage self-esteem. Studies show that children who are raised by authoritarian parents usually are prone to developing self-esteem issues, since they believe no one values their opinions. Also, they are prone to becoming hostile and aggressive, which is their way of hiding their fear, anxiety, shame, and embarrassment. Of course, this facilitates a breeding ground for automatic negative thoughts and angers. As a child raised by authoritarian parents, you may develop a behavioural pattern of lying, just so you can escape being punished by your parents when you do something wrong. Another style of parenting is permissive. The permissive parent is indulgent and overprotective. A child raised by a permissive parent would grow up to be undisciplined due to the parent's inability to enforce necessary rules. Permissive parents expect very little from their children, and they don't hide this. They tend to make very little demands of their children. Baumrind posts that permissive parents respond to their kids more than they make demands. A typical permissive parent is extremely lenient. He or she will forgive a kid for anything at all. They also act more like friends with their children instead of being the parents. If you grew up with parents who never enforce the rules they set, then you were raised with a permissive parenting style. Children raised by permissive parents will likely grow up with behavioural problems because they end up being dependent on their parents. They often struggle with low self-esteem, anxiety, and depression. A child brought up with the permissive parenting style may end up being bossy, impulsive, aggressive, and extremely codependent. Permissive parenting may also result in a lack of social competence, serving as the foundation for chronic anxiety in a child. The child may also turn out to be emotionally inept. Next, there is the authoritative parenting style, which is a perfect blend of the permissive and the authoritarian parenting. Experts regard this as the most positive and healthy parenting style. Similar to authoritarian parents, authoritative parents establish and enforce certain rules for their child to follow. But instead of enforcing them without seeking the child's opinions, they are just as endearing as permissive parents. It is a democratic parenting style with responsive parents. These parents listen and take their child's feelings and needs into consideration when making decisions or rules. They make healthy demands of their children while helping them to provide guidelines and advices. You are less likely to have a negative cognitive process when raised with this kind of parenting style. But the authoritative parenting style can be very demanding, and studies have shown that families living under stress and other unfavorable conditions are unlikely to use this kind of parenting style. This means that children raised in families like this will probably learn to internalize and externalize their feelings and behaviors, since the parents have no time to use the right style of parenting. Lastly, there is the uninvolved or neglecting parenting style, which was added by Maccabee and Martin. This style of parenting is probably worse than authoritarian and permissive, because the parent doesn't get involved with the child's life at all. Uninvolved parents usually don't know what's going on in their child's life. They simply don't care enough to even set rules or give guidance to their kid. Uninvolved parenting has been linked to destructive behaviors in children. If you grew up with a parent who never bothered to find out who your friends were or where you were spending your time, then your parent was probably uninvolved. You were probably raised with little guidance and no parental attention. There is a poor parent-child relationship, and the parent rarely exhibits warmth. In fact, a typical uninvolved parent doesn't even have an interest in being a parent, so they are unable to give the love, care, and guidance that you would expect from a caregiver. Children are meant to depend on the parental structure, and when there is no structure in place, like the uninvolved parenting, it results in internalizing and externalizing behavioral problems for children. Evidence shows kids raised by uninvolved parents have more internalized and externalized problems. In conclusion, you can see that the parenting styles have a great impact on how kids develop their cognitive processes, and this in turn affects the behavioral development and adjustment process. In other words, if you are raised with a negative parenting style, you are likely to develop cognitive and behavioral problems as an adult. So before we move on, I just want to throw out there, too many people place the blame of their problems on their parents and say, I am this way and it's someone else's fault. Sure, some things affect the way that some people develop in certain ways, but don't be so quick to push the blame on someone else. Understand that your actions are your own, and the only way to change them is to accept them. Adopting a positive behavioral pattern. Cognitive behavioral therapy aims to help you understand how your thoughts affect your behaviors, and how you can break out of that behavioral pattern by addressing your cognitive makeup. Breaking out of a negative behavioral pattern is no easy feat, but it is something you can do as long as you are determined and resilient. In therapy, you will be taken through a number of procedures to help you stop negative behaviors. An example of negative behavior you can address with CBT is addiction and anxiety disorders such as OCD. I will be giving you some tips on how to adopt a positive behavioral pattern and let go of your bad behavior by addressing your mind. This will give you insight into what to expect in therapy and also aid you in achieving your therapy goals, especially those pertaining to behavior. Some people try to stop recurring negative behaviors by attempting to use force, but this never works. Your best bet for breaking out of a negative pattern is to find healthy methods. The first step is to identify the behavioral pattern for the negative behavior you are trying to break out of. Try to list down the number of times you have been in a particular situation, and also determine what got you in that situation. When you do something repeatedly, it means you have a pattern on hand, and that is exactly what you were looking for. As an example, let's say you notice that you always resort to alcohol to help yourself every time you suffer a disappointment. Note the number of times you have been in similar situations and responded in that exact way. If you have been in that situation at least 5 to 10 times, it means there is a pattern there. Once you recognize that there is a recurring theme, you can move on to the next step. Note down the factors and circumstances that led to the outcome. you didn't like. For instance, if the pattern you detect is that you always get drunk when faced with disappointment, note down what you think is the factor that always leads to disappointment. Is it because of something you always do? Maybe you have a habit of arriving late to interviews, and this always results in disappointment. Or maybe you already have a mindset that you won't get the job anyway, so you never take your time to prepare. It could also be that there is more than one factor serving as a trigger for this situation you keep getting into. Now, find out the common denominator in all of these factors you have been able to identify the trigger for your behavior. What is the trend here? Possibly, you will find more than two factors having a common denominator. Your common factor could be that your mindset you have that you will never get the job anyway. There may also be more than one common factor. Find out the cause of the common factor or factors. What is the reason behind that factor? Dig into this and you will likely find something. Why do you have that kind of mindset? Has it been like that? Has it always been like that? Or is it because of a few disappointments you suffered recently? Search for the reason within yourself. Once you know this reason, the appropriate thing to do is address it. You know that the root of your behavioral problem, and all you need to do is take steps to address the root so you can solve the problem at hand. Looking at your previous example again, if you find out the reason behind your disappointment is because you never prepare for job interviews due to a mindset that you will fail anyway, and this is what has been causing you your recent overwhelming interest in alcohol, then what you need to address is that mindset. To do this, you may decide to actually take time out and put effort into preparing for a new job interview, and then see how that pans out. Of course, the steps you take will not be addressing your pattern of alcohol consumption directly, but you will be addressing the root of the issue, and this will ultimately impact and change the pattern. Adopting a positive behavioral pattern requires being dedicated to the whole process and staying aligned with your objectives. You must ensure you are committed. Remember that your beliefs are sometimes the foundation of negative behavior. So, always try to address the belief first so that you can change the behavior. In short, always begin from the root of the problem. So we're going to cut it there. We're going to come into chapter 6 tomorrow, CBT and anxiety. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.